Good evening. This is our last topic in organizational behavior. We are going to look at organizational culture and change. This is very important, and it is relevant also to organizational behavior because organizational culture has an influence on organizational behavior and several organizational outcomes. So I'll take you through this, and it's my pleasure to take you through this very interesting topic. The learning objectives for this topic is to describe the common characteristics of organizational culture, to compare the functional and dysfunctional effects of organizational culture on the people of the organization and on the people and the organization, to identify the factors that create and sustain organization's culture, and to show how culture is transmitted to employees. Finally, to show how national culture can affect the way organization's culture is transported to another country. What is organizational culture? Organizational culture refers to a system of shared meaning held by members that distinguishes the organization from other organizations. 7 primary characteristics seem to capture the essence of an organization's culture. These are innovation and risk-taking orientation, attention to detail, outcome orientation, people orientation, team orientation, aggressiveness, and stability. These are beautiful characteristics that can help us to define or to characterize organizational culture. There are cultures where innovation or risk-taking is not preferred. People prefer the status quo. They do not want to take risks. So such organizations where risk is not preferred, where risk-taking is not allowed, would create a particular kind of organizational culture. Secondly, there are organizations where people are required to pay attention to detail. So there are written down rules and regulations how you are supposed to perform something, perform your duties, and everything is expected to be done to the detail. So that is also a kind of a culture in an organization. There's also a kind of culture where the organization is only interested in the outcome. The organization is outcome oriented. They don't care how you get that outcome. If it is productivity, they are interested in productivity, and they do not care what pains you go to get to that productivity. So they are outcome oriented. They are not interested in how you get there. There are also organizations where they are people orientation. They are people oriented. So they care so much about people. So in such an organization, you define a culture where people are valued, their rights are valued, their interests are valued, their pains are taken care of, their needs are take center place, and so on and so on. There are also organizations where there is team orientation. People work in teams. So team is preferred to individual work, individual pursuit. So there is team orientation, and the competence and capabilities are all geared towards team orientation and team competence. So such is also a subculture that you can see in some organizations. And there's also aggressiveness, where competition is preferred, competition is promoted, competition is supported. So everybody is working competitively. Everybody is aggressive. that would also define a subculture within an organization. But there are also organizations where pursuit of competitiveness is not tolerated, is not preferred, and so that would be also a culture of its own. And finally, there is stability, where people prefer the status quo. They do not want to trouble the waters, and that would also be kind of a culture characteristic of that organization. So how does culture present itself? The layers of culture. This illustration here is an illustration of a volcanic mountain, how magma comes out of the heart of the earth, and then it pours out to form the volcanic mountain. But this illustration is also good for culture because culture has layers and it has roots. So you see where the middle portion is the root of the culture. Culture is composed of beliefs, values, and assumptions. And then it is expressed through language, material symbols, through stories, through rituals. And then when it pours out, you can see the artifacts of organizational culture. So that is how you can pictorially depict organizational culture. So we can also try to compare and contrast some two organizations here and the way they portray their culture. Organization A, managers must fully document all decisions. So attention to detail. Everything is written in detail. Managers document all decisions. So you make decisions only which has been authorized and approved by management. You cannot make the decision on your own as an individual. And so that is a subculture. Creative decisions, change, and risks are not encouraged. And extensive rules and regulations exist for all employees. Productivity is valued over employee morale. Employees are encouraged to stay within their own department and not to interact with others in different departments. Individual effort is encouraged. Individual effort is encouraged. So recently, when we were studying organizational structure, we kind of were looking at two types of structures. There is the organic structure and the mechanistic structure. When you look at this organization A, there are some similarities you can see with the mechanistic structure. So this is a kind of culture here where individuality is promoted and there is the authority of the manager. There is a wide span of leadership, and there is authority hierarchy, and so on and so on. So this is organization A, and so when you come across such an organization, you can identify the kind of culture in that organization. But when you move to organization B, you'll find that it is more organic. So management encourages and rewards risk-taking and change. So change is desirable and encouraged. So people are free to take risks, and they are not punished for taking risks. Employees are encouraged to run with ideas, and failures are treated as learning experiences. You can start something so weird, so risky, but nobody will punish you for venturing into the unknown and trying to focus into the unknown future with your endeavors. Employees have few rules and regulations to follow, and productivity is balanced with treating its people right. So there is people orientation as well. Productivity is valued, but people are also valued. So you can't trade productivity with the people. So team members are encouraged to interact. So there's freedom to interact in teams, to work in teams. And so with people at all levels and functions. And many rewards are team-based. So this this is kind of a culture that would probably take you to the 21st or 22nd century. Because, yeah, so, but the point here is, are you able to identify cultures in organizations? Have you been, for example, as a student, have you done internship in an organization where you can identify some of these characteristics? Or are you studying in a university or in a college where you can identify some of these characteristics? So these are organizational cultures that can be identified by anybody. So do organizations have uniform cultures? Maybe not, but it is desirable that organizations have uniform cultures, but it is not always true that they have uniform cultures. So why? Because organizational culture represents a common perception held by organizational members. Yes, but we may have two types of cultures: the dominant culture, which expresses the core values of a majority of members, and then the subcultures, which tend to develop in large organizations in response to corporate problems. I mean, some organizations may become so big that it is not, the organization is too big that members of particular departments may decide to develop their own subcultures to be able to find their place in the huge organization. So subcultures may develop. They may be similar, but also they may be different from the dominant culture. So the bigger the organization, the danger the more difficult it is to have a unified organizational culture. How do organizational cultures form? How do organizational cultures form? There is an exhibit here that helps us to see how organizational cultures are formed. It all begins with the philosophy of the founder. The philosophy of the founder will help us to appreciate, to know the vision and the mission of the organization. And that is very important. I think even when Church of Uganda was contemplating to open UCU, where most of you are studying, you'll find that there was a philosophy that directed or guided the formation of this university. So that philosophy is very, very important. So once you have a philosophy, then you can document that philosophy, and it becomes a guiding instrument that can help you to start off this organization. And then you build on this slowly by slowly over time. So one of the ways to start off the process of building a culture is when you begin to employ people in your organization. Selection criteria. How do you select the kind of people that you want to work with you? At the recruitment stage, you must be able to carefully select people who support your philosophy, who subscribe to your philosophy, so that this culture can begin to be transmitted through your staff. So even at UCU here for staff, you have to go through an interview, you have to go through a selection process where you have to prove in some way or the other that you subscribe to the philosophy of UCU. And in that way, you can be sure that you will be recruiting only people who subscribe to the philosophy and will be able to promote the culture of the organization. Now, after that, you have what? The top management. The top management must support the culture of the organization to the core. I mean, the founder of UCU, for example, is Church of Uganda, Church of the Province of Uganda. But the top management, the VC, for example, and his deputies, must be prepared to support the philosophy of the founders. If they are not, then the organization will lose its culture. The top management must support the founding philosophy, the philosophy of the founders, so that it can be able to grow. Now, through the top managers, there is a socialization that takes place. And socialization is basically a process of bringing the members of the organization up to speed with the culture of the organization. Recently, UCU was able to come up with 5 core values that most of you may even be familiar with. The core values are Christ-centeredness, integrity, diligence, stewardship, and servanthood. Those are 5 core values that we now follow at UCU. And these core values, we have to be constantly reminded about it. We have to be educated about it. We have to practice its principles so that we are socialized. By and by, in fact, if you came today and you're seeking for a job at UCU, they will ask you whether you know the core values of UCU. And if you don't know, then probably they will help you to know. And so once you know it, you're expected to pursue, to follow those core values. So socialization is a process by which people get to become members and appreciate the philosophy, the core values, and the other values of the organization. So those processes eventually lead us to what we call organization's culture. How do we keep a culture alive? I've already mentioned this selection process. Every selection process must go through that search for people who are fit, who can fit within the organizational values. The top management must be in support all the time. They should never relax over that. And the socialization process must be pursued constantly. What are the functions of organizational culture? So organizational culture is like a glue that helps to hold an organization together. What you believe in is what helps to glue the organization together. It also helps to define our boundary. People are able to know the difference between UCO, for example, and Chambogo University. They are able to know because there are 2 different philosophies behind it. There are also 2 different cultures, so to say. So you can be able to define and distinguish which is which. The same to organizations out there. So it also conveys a sense of identity for organizational members. You know what you are because the culture defines you. For example, in UCU we have certain principles that we follow. We call them identity statements. The principle of prayer, the principle of fellowship, and the principle of the rule of faith, the rule of prayer, and the rule of life. Those are core principles that identify UCU. The rule of faith, the rule of prayer, and the rule of life. The details I cannot give you now, but as a student, as a member of the community, you need to be interested in those rules. They are the core rules. Every member who comes to this university must agree. Even students, I think, you're expected to sign at the application stage those rules which identify you, that identify the university. So culture also helps to facilitate commitment to something larger than one's individual self-interest. Culture brings us together. Otherwise, if all of us had our own cultures, it would be chaos. But organizational culture helps us to come together, and so that we pursue something bigger than our own individual interests. It also enhances social system stability. The organizational culture helps us to be stable, and it serves as a sense-making and a social mechanism to keep us together. Can culture also be a liability? Yes, in some instances. Culture can be a barrier to change, and we are going to discuss this also in detail. Culture can be a barrier to change. Once the culture has been entrenched, it's difficult to break that culture. And culture can also be a barrier to diversity. Once the members have internalized the culture, it's difficult to embrace diversity. And indeed, if somebody came who's a little different in many respects, they would say, no, you'll not get here because you are different. So diversity is challenged. Diversity is not entertained because you are different. And therefore, that can also be a weakness. The other point is that in mergers and acquisitions, you get trouble. If the culture has already been built, and you say that their cultures are not, the cultures can be so unique. I mean, just imagine, this is hypothetical. If you wanted to merge UCU and Chambogo, for example, this is just hypothetical. If you wanted to merge those two institutions, now whose values will you follow when you merge? So it's difficult. It's difficult. Either you either you say I will be swallowed by Chambogo and we pursue all the values of Chambogo, or you say Chambogo will swallow. I mean, UCU will swallow Chambogo, and then the Chambogo people will pursue all the UCU values. But that cannot be true. That can be difficult. So when companies want to acquire other companies or want to merge with other companies, that process can be difficult because of the differences in culture. So what are the conditions for culture change? What brings about culture change? Now we are going to emphasize the issue of culture change. If there is a dramatic crisis, there will be need for culture change. If there's turnover in leadership, if there's change in leadership, there may be a need for cultural change. If the organization is very young and very small, there may be need for cultural change. And when there is a weak culture, there will be a need for cultural change. So there are many preconditions why there might be a need for cultural change. Recently, we had now COVID-19 has been a thorn in our flesh. When the universities closed in March, on March 18th, we thought it was going to open very quickly. But March went, April came, June came, May and June came, July came, and so on. And it was going forever and ever. So now, you thought, now we cannot keep like this forever. This is a crisis, something must happen. So all of a sudden, we are thinking about a total cultural change from the familiar classroom teaching to the unfamiliar online teaching. That is a dramatic crisis that will bring about a cultural change. Now I am teaching without having interaction directly with my students because of such a crisis. So crises like COVID-19 can bring about a dramatic change in culture of the organization. Online learning now is the order for UCU, and there, of course, there are challenges with this, but this is how cultures change. And of course, there's also resistance to change that we are going to emphasize later. But at this point, we have to know what causes change. And one of these is a crisis, or if there was a change in leadership, or if the organization is so small and it wants to grow, or when the culture is very weak. I remember when the first vice chancellor stepped here in 2001, he had to transform the culture completely. he was not very satisfied with the culture that he found here. He had to transform it completely. One of the aspects was, for example, people were teaching day and they were earning a salary, and then they teach in the evening and they were earning a salary. And so he said, how can I know who is teaching day and who is teaching the evening? And how can I compute the salary clearly without knowing how much is going to be spent in a month? And so he said, no, this has to change. We have to consolidate payment. If you teach day and evening, it has to be consolidated so that he knows that 1 million is going to go out for staff A. And if there are 3,000 or 200 staff or 3,000 staff, he knows he can calculate and compute. I know if I have so much revenue, I am able to pay. But not that the payments were not uniform and therefore it was unpredictable. Those are things that can change if they are needed. So, what are the suggestions for changing a culture? So we have to have the top management people become positive role models and setting the tone through their behavior. This is part of what I was saying. The top management must become the role models. The change you want must be seen in the top leadership. You cannot say we want change when you are not promoting change, when you are not an example of change. You can't. You can't say, do as I say, but don't do as I do. You can't succeed that way. So top management must become positive role models and they have to set the tone for change. So they have to create new stories, they have to create new symbols, they have to create new rituals, they have to replace those which are currently in vogue. Those have to be changed. They have to select, promote, and support employees who espouse the new values that are sought. They have to redesign the socialization process to align with the new values. If you have been following my talk, we have already mentioned this. Change must start with the top, and there must be ways to improve, to bring about change. Okay? Stories must change, symbols must change, rituals must change, and so on and so on. And the staff who are joining you must also subscribe to the change. If they don't, then they may not come in. And so the socialization process must be a deliberate attempt to make sure that everybody is in line with the change. So it continues. So change the reward system to encourage acceptance of the new set of values. Change the reward system to encourage acceptance of the new set of values. Back to the payment system where some people were paid day, full time, and then they were paid differently evening. When this system was changed, a salary was increased so that there is a mid position. Of course, there are those who gain very much in the process because now there was a general uplifting of the salary system. So that there's motivation, so that you don't say, oh God, I am not going to teach in the evening. If your timetable to teach in the evening, it is part of the hours for the day. And so that is a change in the reward system so that you can appreciate the change in the culture. So replace unwritten norms with formal rules and regulations that are tightly enforced. The staff handbook was written and clearly written so that every member of staff that joins gets a copy of the staff handbook, and it has detailed rules and norms that you have to follow. And so you also have to check current subcultures through transfers, through job rotation, and through terminations. If you find people who are resistant, then you tell them bye, because now this is a new culture, we have to support it. There are people who are resistant, then you can part ways with them. So also work to get peer group consensus through utilization of employee participation and creation of a climate with a high level of trust. So involve the members, build consensus, discuss I remember we sat for almost 3 months discussing the future of UCU. The curriculum we had to be revamped significantly. For almost 3 months, we were talking about the curriculum. What should a curriculum for a Christian university look like? That was a big debate. Some people even had to run away because they were not very convinced that they know what a curriculum for a Christian university should look like. And they were not even willing even to participate in the discussion. But that is what happens when a culture has to be changed. Sometimes you'll find people will not be happy with it, and so they can even choose to quit. So now, this is, we are borrowing also the concept of Kut-Lewin's change model. Change is a process, and change has, according to Kut-Lewin's three-step model, change goes through the unfreezing, and then it goes to moving, and then it goes back to refreezing. Unfreezing, moving, then refreezing. The details follow. What is unfreezing? Unfreezing is getting ready for change. You have to be prepared for change. If you are not prepared, somebody has to prepare you. Somebody has to prepare you. We had a bit of challenge here because the period between when we decided to take online learning and the period we are supposed to start online learning was very short. So some staff had to get, the training for staff didn't have enough time. And so sometimes there are challenges up to date. We are still learning how to do this business. But to be prepared is very important. So there is an unfreezing point where people are told, get ready. We are no longer going to use our yellow notes. We're no longer going to use our other notes that we have had for the last many years. We are now going to go online. So you have to get ready for the change. That is what Kut-Lewin calls unfreezing. And then moving means making the change, like what we are doing now. We are implementing the change. Then up to some point, you have to refreeze by stabilizing the change. Once these things are working well, you need to refreeze. You don't want to go backwards. You need to refreeze so that the change can be implemented. So this is another illustration of the same thing. So on the y-axis, you have the desired state, and on the x-axis, you have time. So, and in the middle there, you have what we call status quo. There must be driving forces coming from below to change the status quo. But from above, there are restraining forces. Okay? Wherever there is a need to change the status quo, there are also restraining forces. And I am amused because recently we all did online exams. Sorry, we did take-home exams. And now we wanted to go back to sit-in exams. And the students are saying, and yet at the beginning, when we said we were going to do take-home exams, they were all up in arms. There were people who were up in arms. Now, when we give them online exams after the crisis, they say, oh, yes, thank you. And now we want to go back to the old system. They're saying no. Anyway, generally speaking, change is like that. Driving forces are always there. There are forces for change, like COVID has been the driving force. But then the change itself has people who are restraining. I remember there are people who have decided to take a dead semester because they say, no, we cannot go with online learning. Some parents have said, I don't even trust online learning. I can't even accept my son or my daughter to go for online. Those are restraining forces. Those are restraining forces. So real life has got two forces, the forces for change and the restraining forces. That one is there in whatever sphere of life. So, but later on, I think if the forces of change are stronger, then you can be able to move. You can see how the graph goes up. But when the graph goes up and you reach the desired state, you have to freeze. Otherwise, it can fall back. So, unfreezing means to arouse dissatisfaction with the current state and then to activate the strength of top management to support, and then use the participation in decision making, and then also build rewards so that people are prepared for change. Then you start moving, then set goals, institute acceptable changes that reinforce and support that change, evolve management structures for that change, maintain open two-way communication so that the change does not backfire. Then later on, after the change had succeeded, build success experiences, reward desired behavior, evolve structures to institutionalize the change and make the change work. If you really want to follow this discussion and using the example of online learning, you should be able to follow this clearly because this is exactly what you're going through right now. So there are success stories in the online learning classes, and they are also kind of not very good success stories. But the point is that the success stories should be encouraged and promoted. And if possible, it should be documented. How best can this online learning be done? And how best can it not be done? Those are things that should be documented. And therefore, there must be structures also that can help us to institutionalize the change. We thank God that there is a committee and there is also a department that has been working day and night to make sure that the online learning goes on. People have called, people have sent messages, people have written emails, people have complained. The departments have been working day and night to help you people to be able to enroll and access the online platform. So those are systems. They can be improved. Next year, they will be much better than now because of the lessons that we have learned through these experiences. So what are the sources of resistance to change? This one, you also know it, that resistance to change is there. The old habit, for example, you're all familiar with the old system, and any new system will conflict with your habit. There's also security. I'm familiar with my notes. I know how to do my assignments the old way. Security. Now the new system is coming to remove that security. There's also economic factors. There are people complaining that the data costs quite a lot of money and so on. But there are also other economic factors that you can talk about. There is also the fear of the unknown. How is it going to be? Somebody said, you can't study accounting and finance online. How? But anyway, it's possible. We will see. There's also selective information processing. Some people they only love information which they love to see and to hear. When there's something that they don't love, they will not take it up. So they only love to take what they are familiar with. So those are all challenges or resistance to change. Why is there cynicism about change? So there is feeling of uninformed. People are not, they feel uninformed about what is happening. And they also lack communication and respect from one's supervisor, if it is an organization. Lack of communication and respect from one's union representative, if it is those changes that affect labor unions, and also lack of opportunity for meaningful participation in decision making. That is also true even for you. Most of you were involved into this discussion. Your guild leaders were involved in the discussion, and they have been carried on board most of the time. Sources of organizational resistance to change. This is similar to what we've just seen, but there's also what we call, for example, the threat to establish resource allocations. There's also structural inertia. Inertia, that force that resists a change in structure, structural inertia. Then there is limited focus of change. People don't know where we are going. They haven't seen it before. For those who have done online learning, for example, they will not resist because they have already got experiences. But if you haven't, you will always say, how is it going to be? I don't know. There's also what we call group inertia. There are people who may have missed this semester because their colleagues are saying, "Oh, where are you? How are you going to do it? It might not work. You're risking. You might fail, and so on." Those are group inertia issues. So there is also threat to expertise. People are saying, "Oh, Hey, of course, there are even teachers who might say, "Oh God, I'm not going online because it is going to distort my expertise. I don't think I am capable to do to do the teaching online," and so on and so on. Those are all threats to expertise, and it's threatening your stability. There's also threat to establish power relationships, and it happens. It happens a lot. Online is threatening established power relationship. Power now belongs to the people out there. The initial power that you had, you don't have all of it now. So those are all issues or sources of resistance to change. How do you overcome them? Through education and communication, we need that a lot. Sensitization, we need it a lot. We need constant communication. Otherwise, the resistance will be very strong. We need participation. Involve the members in participation. Let participation be regular. Let there also be facilitation and support. Let there be support and facilitation. Let there be negotiation. Let there be cooperation. And at the very worst, you can use coercion. At the very worst, use coercion. I was amused when they asked some faculties not even appear on, if they to appear on face to face. They said, but all third years, all finalists were supposed to come face to face. I said, no, some faculties are not coming. We don't have enough space. So some kind of coercion was used here. And of course, there has been submission. It was better than nothing at all. So the students of Faculty of Business, for example, and Social Sciences, well, even if they were finalists, they were not allowed to come in because there are issues that we could not manage. And so we coerced them to study online, even if they were supposed to be here. And so how does change how does change as a process happen? And I think this is a diagram that also kind of exemplifies what we have been talking about. What we desire is the desired state. We want to reach the desired state. How do we get there? We are at the present state, the yellow triangle. That's not the yellow square is the present state. We want to get to the triangle, which is the desired state. In between there is what we call a transition state. But on top, you have driving forces and restraining forces, and they are equally strong. So it is a big thing to continue to get to the desired state. You have to fight. We've already talked about the unfreezing. You have to prepare people for the transition. And then there is a freezing after the transition has happened. Make sure that it doesn't fall back. Freeze it at that point so that the change that you have attained, you don't fall back. And for us who are learning to teach online, what the lessons we have learned the lessons we have learned about teaching online, we don't want to lose them. We want only to improve on them and to perfect them. Because it eventually to be cheaper for students to learn online if you don't have to come to the university for housing, you don't have to come to the university and so on. You can learn from home. If we are perfect our game, perfect our game at this, it will be a good thing for everybody. Finally, what are the implications for what we have been talking about? Employees form an overall subjective perception of the organization based on such factors as degree of risk, tolerance, team emphasis, support of the people. These are some of the characteristics that distinguish organizations as different from the other. How are they? Are they more people-oriented? Are they more productive-oriented? Are they more team-oriented? Are they more competitive? Are they more Those are qualities that distinguish organizations from the others. This overall perception becomes, in effect, the organization's culture or personality. Once you look at those characteristics, you can be able to say, this organization is different from the other one because of those characteristics. These favorable or unfavorable perceptions then affect employee performance and satisfaction, with the impact being greater for stronger cultures. Indeed, there are cultures that, when built and strengthened, they have a positive influence on performance and on employee satisfaction. That would be our desirable state, where our organizational cultures influence the way we do things and the way we perfect our work. So, just as people's personalities tend to be stable over time, so too do strong cultures. Cultures that are built over time become strong, and they persist. That's why when you want to change a culture that has been entrenched, you have to go through a struggle, through the processes that we have just talked about. You have to do the unfreezing, then you have to undertake the change, because there are opposing forces there. You have to undertake the change. After the change, you have to unfreeze. You have to refreeze again so that the change does not fall back. And therefore, one of the more important managerial implications of organizational culture relates to the selection decision. Always be the gatekeeper in your selection policy. Be the gatekeeper so that you don't bring in people who don't subscribe to the culture of the organization. Hiring individuals whose values don't align with those of your organization is not good. Change must be managed, and it is not an easy process. We have already debated this at length. Individuals and organizations resist change, and that is expected. So to be successful at change, it is necessary to break down the resistance to change. Change is necessary. The only thing which is constant is change. So you can never avoid change. COVID-19 has forced us, and we have to embrace the change. There are many things that we have learned that we shouldn't have learned if there was no COVID. But we thank God that there's a crisis like COVID that has enabled us to change. I am excited every day when I find my students say, oh, I have been able to upload my assignment on the Moodle platform. Oh, I have been able to submit my assignment on the Moodle platform. I have been able to log in. I have been able to access your materials. I have been able to access your assignment. I have been able to do this. Those are learning experiences that we don't want to go back. There are students who are already enrolling for universities abroad online because the experience that they have learned online here. You don't want to lose. Some of you might want to do masters abroad online. It will be cheaper for you to do a master's abroad online, other than the air ticket and the accommodation that you might need to fly abroad. So please, this is a change that is inevitable. This is a change that is necessary. This is a change that we do not want to backslide from. Forward ever, backward never. Thank you very much.